calendar, we follow the Gregorian calendar. And before that was the Julian calendar. It got corrected in the 16th, 15th, 16th century. We have leap years every 4 years, which is where we add a day to February. And then every 100 years, like 2000, 2100, 2200, then we don't add the fourth date. And that's because the calendar, it's 360, I think it's 365.25 days. But there's some small little discrepancy there where it's not quite that. And so you've got to drop one out of every 25 leap years, adding that day. Otherwise, you end up with the calendar eventually not aligning with the movements of the sun and the earth. Does that make sense? So there's an old calendar, the Julian calendar, that goes back to Roman times. And then that calendar, it changed. So like my birth religion is the Orthodox religion, the Eastern Orthodox religion. And we celebrate Christmas in the beginning of January, because they never changed. The Catholic Church came up with the Gregorian calendar, and the Orthodox Church split from the Catholic Church a few centuries prior, and so they were like, we don't want your new calendar. So they're following this older calendar, and gradually they're falling further and further away from the cycle of the sun and the equinoxes and so now it's like in the middle of January when we celebrate our Christmas. You follow? So they corrected it, and it was quite nuanced, the correction. They added the leap years, but then they also added one in every 100 leap years, you back off. Every 25 leap years, every century, you back off. So in 2000, there was only 28 days in February. Anyway, we have our calendar. Our calendar is based on a lunar cycle. And today is Guru Purnima. It's full moon. And it's the full moon that celebrates, it's called Guru Purnima. Amongst most Hindus, they celebrate the birthday of their guru on this day. So they honor their guru and do some worship of their guru on this day. In our Vaishnav tradition, we don't do that. We celebrate, we think that that's kind of impersonal. Like if you had a birthday every year where you celebrated, everybody's birthday on the same day every year, like all your teachers on the same day, it's a little impersonal, it's a little generic. And so we celebrate the actual birthday of our teachers as a special event. But for most of the Hindu world, Guru Purnima is a day where you offer some ritual worship to your guru. Now, it's also the first day of Chaturmas. There's 4 months of the year where we fast from various things. The first month you fast from spinach. And the second month you fast from yogurt. And the third month you fast from milk. And the fourth month you fast from urd dal, which practically we don't eat. and then there's other fasting that you do. But these 4 months when the monsoons hit, the monsoons are just hitting India right now. People tend to not travel and they stay in one place. And because they're in one place, they're more set up to perform austerities and observe vows. And so for 4 months out of the year, pious Hindus observe special vows. And that's during the 4 months, Chatur 4, months, the 4 months. Today is the first day of that 4-month period. In pious Hindu society, people don't marry during these 4 months. And so you'll see there's a bunch of marriages up till today, and then there's a bunch of marriages that occur in November, late November, mid-late November. It changes every year because it's a lunar calendar, which is significantly different than the solar calendar. And they add a whole month in. Every few years we add a whole extra month to account because the lunar calendar is 360 days. And so things go off pretty quick. And the way they fix it is they just add an extra month in. That month is called Purushottam Mass. It's a special month that's added every few years. And it reconciles and fixes the discrepancies that come about as a result of following a lunar calendar. A lunar calendar is much more natural. It's the calendar that you should follow if you are planting crops. It's the way the world actually works. It's what you experience. You experience the tides coming and going and the moon affecting things fairly dramatically. But the lunar calendar is 360 days a year, and so you're losing days every year, and every 7 years you got to add a whole other month to fix it up. Today is also the disappearance day of Sanatana Goswami, one of our original framers, a big guru in our lineage about 5 centuries ago. He passed away on this day, and the day our gurus die is observed. We observe rituals on that day. They attain perfection. Sometimes we say they attained the Ganga. So we'd say they attained the Ganga on that day. Or were in trance and they left this world. Took samadhi, they attained the Ganga. They're respectful ways of saying that our gurus passed away. So, a lot of our gurus pass away in the summertime. If you look at our calendar, we probably have 100 disappearance days that are listed on our calendar of various saints over the centuries and millennia. And if you look, there's a large portion that take place during the summertime. Because when it gets really hot in India, it gets like 120 degrees out. And people die every year. It's just what happens if you live in a place with that kind of extreme climate. In the dead of winter in India, it's not such a big deal, but in the peak of summer, it's no joke. So, yeah, it's a holy day today. And one of my gurus passed away today. Just about 12 hours ago. At 5:40 a.m., so about 12 hours ago, a little more than 12 hours ago, he passed away. Now, when I say my guru, I should be a little, guru means teacher. I have had teachers that have passed away. But I was quite young. I was in my early 20s, and so I didn't really understand the significance of it. Or they were people that I knew, who knew me, who I had served, who were my elders, but we weren't super close. This is the first time that, as a real adult, that I've suffered the leaving of one of my gurus, somebody who I was real close to. So out of my teachers, I got 20 teachers in my life who've really left their stamp on me, and of those 20, maybe 10 of them have really been involved in my life in a substantive way. Maybe 10 of them have been involved in my life in a really major way, out of 20, let's say. And then out of those 10, maybe 5, 6 of them I'm really close to. Maj is in that last group. His name is Bhakti Charu Swami. Bhakti Charu Swami. And so he just passed away. He was in Orlando, Florida. He passed away due to complications from the COVID-19. And he was 74 years old. I knew him for maybe 27 years now. So since I think I met him when I was 20 or 21. So almost for my entire adult life. And we were quite close. We're quite close. There's different types of gurus in your life, according to our tradition. There's the gurus who they speak and you listen. And they convince you of two things. Number one, they convince you of the object of worship, which means they give you a conception of God. And number two is they convince you about the method of worship. They teach you how to connect with God. At the beginning of your spiritual life, you hear different conceptions of divinity and you become persuaded. If you believe in Jesus, if you're one of the 3 billion people that believes in Jesus, about half the world's population, then there's 12 people you can trace your faith to. Maybe 13 if you throw Paul in the mix. But even Paul never met Jesus. He did have a divine revelation on the road to Damascus. And so he claimed his discipleship based on that, but he never met Jesus. The people who met Jesus are 12. There's 12 apostles. And their writings are where all 3 billion people who have faith in Jesus got their faith from. If you hear about Jesus on TV or read an Encyclopedia Britannica entry on Jesus, then somebody taught the person who wrote that, somebody taught the person who wrote that, and eventually you'll get back to the apostles. Specifically, you'll get back to the 3 apostles, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, who wrote what are called the Synoptic Gospels, the three Gospels that tell the story of Jesus. And that's where your faith in Jesus comes from. There's no Roman record of Jesus living. There's no archaeological evidence of Jesus' life. He didn't write a book. Whatever we know of him came through those people, and their faith in Jesus became the faith of 3 billion people. Same is true for the world's 2 billion Muslims. They got their stuff from Muhammad, and specifically from the followers of Muhammad who put together the Quran from his teachings after he passed away. So sometimes somebody convinces you, hey, this is a proper conception of divinity, and you adopt it, it becomes your own. People don't think, oh, I have a borrowed faith, it's the 12 apostles, it's not me. It's not like that. You might start out like that, but eventually it becomes your own thing. So those people who teach you about the object of worship and the method of worship, they're called your Shravan gurus, the gurus that you hear from, hearing gurus. Then you have a Shiksha guru. The Shiksha guru holds you by the hand and walks you back to heaven. They set an example that you follow, and they guide you through your life, and they help to apply general teachings in a very specific way that allows you to progress. Shiksha means instructing. They're your instructing gurus. And then you have your Diksha guru. Your Diksha guru is the one who gives you initiation. They teach you how to do ritual. They give you our sacred mantra, and they formally represent the tradition, the ritual tradition. And they teach you how to worship the deity. They teach you how to worship the deity. 3 main types of gurus that are mentioned in our tradition. The ones you hear from and get your initial faith from in the object of worship and the method of worship. The ones who hold you by the hand and guide you on a spiritual journey. This is a low battery. And finally, the ones who initiate you into our sacred lineage, our tradition. Samaj would have been one of my Shiksha gurus. He held my hand and taught me and blessed me and guided me in my life. I lost one other Shiksha guru, but like I said, I was young. I was 24 at the time, and I didn't fully realize the import of what had happened until much later. The profoundness of the event didn't affect me until much later. So I thought today we would speak a little bit about my guru, Bhakticharya Maharaj. And I have a specific angle I want to take, a specific road I want to go down. I'm thinking about as a result of hearing all the fireworks. So yeah, it's a holy day. My guru happened to pass away on this holy day. I've had a bunch of my elders pass away in my life, but nobody quite so close to me, or at least nobody so close to me when I was old enough to fully realize the import of it. So it's a first for me. Now, Maharaj was Bengali, and our religious sect, our revival sect, started in Bengal. And so he's from the place of our, where our tribe got its distinctive colors and its distinctive flavor. It means he spoke Bengali, which is the language that many of our sacred texts are written in. It means you know how to cook Bengali food, which is also a very special type of cuisine that shows up in our religious literature, at least the medieval portion of our religious literature. Mars was born in Bengal. He went to study engineering in Germany. And he got interested in spirituality and went to the Himalayas and tried to find a guru for a year. Couldn't. He was a well-to-do Bengali, well enough to do that he went to England. I went to Germany in the 70s, which is no small thing to be able to do that in the 70s. And got disillusioned, quit college, went back to India, searched for a guru, met Srila Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, and was one of maybe two people that Prabhupada met and immediately initiated as a sannyasi within a couple of months. Gave him first, second, and third initiation within a couple of months, made him his personal secretary, and he was with Prabhupada for the last year of his life, right up until he left this world. He was Prabhupada's cook, his secretary. They spoke the same language. Prabhupada was also Bengali. But Prabhupada had, hundreds of Bengali disciples. There was something special about Bhakti Chara Maharaj. He was very mild, very soft-spoken, very selfless, dedicated, studious, humble. He spoke like an angel. I was writing today about him. His voice was honey-laden. His singing voice was honey-laden, and his speaking voice was also honey-laden. When he would sing, people would be mesmerized. And when he spoke, it was almost hypnotizing. He was so soft and mild-mannered and refined. It's interesting, although he was incredibly refined, he had messed up teeth. And, he had all these fabulously wealthy disciples. But he never bothered to fix his teeth. And I think that was because he was a monk, and he was like, why do I need a nice set of teeth? I'm a monk. What does it matter? His heart was bad, and his disciples really wanted to get him an angiogram. He had dozens of cardiologist disciples. They had a whole team that came to him and tried to do an intervention. And he said, I'm not interested. I was there. He said, I drive a car for my master, and my master's the most wealthy person in the universe. And so if the car breaks down, why do I need to bother trying to fix it? My master will just get me a new car. He was talking about his body and Krishna. And so he let them test him a little bit. They did whatever it was, some little electrocardiogram, something, They did a little EKG type thing. But when they wanted to kind of get into it with him, he said, no thanks. If it's my time to go, I'll go. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. He met Prabhupada, and he had a vision of the Panchatattva. He told me this personally. We sat together and he told me. He had a vision of the Panchatattva coming and bringing him to Prabhupada. And that's why he joined the Hare Krishna movement. So he was a special soul from the beginning. Enough that, in his joining our movement, he had an ecstatic vision of Krishna from the get-go. Prabhupada, the first time they met, Prabhupada said, I need you to translate all of my books into Bengali. And Mars spent 15 years of his life translating every one of Prabhupada's books, 50 volumes into Bengali. He personally did it. And it's not no small feat. Bengali is Prabhupada's mother tongue. It's the language of many of our scriptures, but Prabhupada wrote in English. So in some ways, he's translating Prabhupada's books back into their original language. And so I was talking to him about this one time, and I was saying, what did you do? Would you just go back to the original Bengali text? And he said, no, I was tempted to do that. When a book was written in Bengali, I was tempted to go back to the original Bengali text when retranslating Prabhupada into the original language. He said, but it felt disloyal because Prabhupada rendered that text into English in a very particular way. And so I would stay chaste to what he did in his translation work, even if it meant changing the language slightly from what it was originally written in Bengali, because I wanted to make sure the audience understood how Prabhupada was understanding the sacred text. Did you guys follow that? He was very faithful to Srila Prabhupada. He also started huge temple projects, managed Mayapur, our biggest temple in the world, had tens of thousands of disciples, and guided, some huge industrialists and magnates, all the way down to simple village folk. He was an amazing singer. Most recently, he bought 1,000 acres in Florida, just outside of Orlando, and bought a bunch of cows and really got into cow protection, which was something which is also dear to my heart, and so something we bonded over. He wanted to show a working model of cow protection in the Hare Krishna movement in America, so he was busy doing that. Strangely, the last 2 lectures he ever gave before he fell ill with COVID-19 were about the passing away of Srila Prabhupada, something he'd never spoken about. He was there when Prabhupada passed away, so he went through the entire chronology of Prabhupada's departure from this world, bizarrely. And he also spoke about the passing of Bhakti Maharaj, another very, very prominent guru in our movement, somebody who I also knew quite well. And those are the 2 last lectures he gave. And then something else really strange happened that even bothered some of his disciples. Maybe about a month ago, before he got sick, his disciples started doing these evening get-togethers where they would glorify him. Like the purpose of the program was to glorify the Swami. And big leaders in our movement participated in this. They would get together for an evening and just talk about Maharaj and his wonderful qualities. This is kind of frowned upon in our culture. It's not something we do, and it was bizarre enough that some of Maharaj's own disciples were thinking this is a little too fanatic, it's a little too culty. It's not our thing. Work with me, dude. Work with me. Don't freak out, but work with me. You don't seem like you're working very hard. All right. See, look, he stood up and she stopped. Surprise, surprise. Look at that. You got to put in some work. All right. Just keep trying. You don't have to leave. When my kids cry, I get up. People don't get up and they're like this. I'm like, what are you doing? You have to stand up. I know. It's like a parental thing. You're lazy, you don't want to stand up, but then your kids keep crying until you do. So once you stand up, you're in my good books. But when you're sitting down, all right. Yeah, they had these kind of culty Maharaj appreciation nights, and somehow it caught on like wildfire. This was before he even got sick. And it was bizarre enough, and it's unusual enough in the Hare Krishna movement, that some of Maharaj's big disciples were like, this is not appropriate. And then Maharaj got sick, the nights continued, and then right up until his passing away. I think that there was so much, Maj is such a special person, there was so much glorification of Maj that needed to happen before he left this world, that Krishna arranged for it to start before he even got sick. It was like just too much appreciation for Maj that needed to go on. And so Krishna arranged for things to get started before he even got sick. And somehow Maharaj, unbeknownst to himself, or maybe he knew, I don't know, he started speaking about people leaving this world. And he told stories he'd never told before about Srila Prabhupada leaving the world. It's kind of like some last gifts and last lessons to our community. Now Maharaj got sick and they put him on a ventilator, which is not really our thing. Prabhupada's guru said, I don't want to die in a hospital with tubes stuck in me. Prabhupada himself had the same feeling. When Prabhupada started to get really sick, they took him to the hospital and they had to put a catheter in him because his urine had gotten too crystalline because of advanced diabetes, and he was unable to clear his bladder. And it was an emergency. He would have died from not being able to urinate. So they stuck a catheter in him, which allowed him to urinate, bypass his genital and urinate, so they could clear things out. And Prabhupada was even dicey about that. Even in as much extreme agony as he was even dicey about that. Bhakti Charamaj was pretty specific, don't put me on a ventilator. But then when push came to shove, his disciples put him on a ventilator, and he was on a ventilator, unconscious for a couple of weeks before he passed away. Which is not generally the way that Maharaj wanted to go, and it's not generally the way our tradition likes to go. We generally like to go out on our shield a bit more. I have some thoughts about why that happened, but we may get to them, we may not. We'll see how it goes. At least it allowed people to orient themselves around the idea they were going to have to say goodbye to him. And if he passed away suddenly, it would have been much more painful and shocking. And so by Maharaj performing that austerity, the whole world, because he was very, very beloved, they got a chance to let go and wrap their heads around what was to come and make their peace. Hundreds of thousands of devotees were doing kirtan all over the world for Maharaj. For weeks on end. Anyway, so, well, where are we at time-wise? You guys know who Nipsey Hussle is? He got shot to death a year or two ago. He's a West Coast rapper, hip-hop artist. I was watching a video of him recently. He was being pestered by paparazzi, and he got a little violent with them, and they threatened to call the police on him. And he laughed at them. And he said, they said, well, you know, you're a star, so you have to tolerate us. And his response was, I'm a rolling 60s crip first, and I'm a star second. And don't disrespect me, because I'd rather die than be disrespected. And don't think I won't get violent with you, because going to jail doesn't scare me. he seemed sincere in his threats of violence. The fireworks reminded me of this. I don't know if I ever told this before. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I hung out with some pretty serious characters. I hung out with some pretty serious gangbangers who were also murderers. And a bunch of them are in prison for life. A bunch of them are dead. But I remember one time we were sitting around getting high on PCP. It's a rather serious drug. Anybody ever tried PCP? No, it's like a whole nother level of drug. It's like a... If you ask a room full of people, anybody ever tried cocaine? Some people raise their hand. Or ever tried heroin? Some people raise their hand. You ask 100 people who's tried PCP, and like generally speaking, no one raises their hand. You never did Sherm? No. You never did PCP?
One time, but it wasn't that strong. Like, it was on a cigarette, a thick cigarette.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that strong?
I mean, not because I heard stories about it really like being like, you know, a tranquilizer and, you know, messing up.
I mean, the first time I used PCP in the same way you're talking about, I lost 6 hours of my life. And when I came to, I was 50 miles from where I started. I think you must have done something else.
Well, they call it butt naked too, so like a lot of people see them on cops when they naked and like fight the cops with broomsticks.
Yeah.
Like I never experienced that.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, we were sitting around and these guys were heavy hitters. And I remember one of them saying, when I do drive-bys and the gangsters run into the groups of women and children, I shoot the women and children. I'm going to get them, whoever I have to go through. He's in jail now for murder. But I remember he was talking about this, and even at that age, even as, heavy a scene as I was into, I was like, ooh, that's like, I'm not behind that. That doesn't work for me. You're cool, just relax. Just chill out. Just keep working with your kid. But I remember it was quite common, like amongst these people, that they were ready to die for their gang. There was a real mood of fearlessness that they had. They were ready to kill or die for their tribe. I don't think most people have hung out with people like this. But it's like, in a twisted way, it's like hanging out with a warrior. I've also spent time with, Marines and people in the armed forces, people in special forces. It's a similar mood. They're ready to die for their flag, they're ready to die for their country, they're ready to die for their tribe. It's not as glorious when you hear about it with gang members, but it actually, you feel the same when you're with these people. I've always respected people who are willing to die for what they believed in. And essentially what that means is you have something in your life which you're afraid of losing, more than dying. Your integrity, the respect of your people, your honor. Krishna says in the Gita, Akirti Maranat Atirichyati. Dishonor is worse than death. This statement, dishonor is worse than death, is axiomatic for certain people. If you're a certain type of person, you hear that dishonor is worse than death, you think, yeah, of course. Other people you make a statement like this to, and they think, no, it's not. I'd rather be dishonored than die. The statement dishonor is worse than death is predicate on you thinking honor is more important than your life. If you think that way, then the statement immediately makes sense. It's obvious. It's self-evident. It's almost tautological. It requires no explanation. If you don't think that your honor is worth more than your life, and you hear this statement, it doesn't make sense. It seems foolish. Does that make sense? If you don't believe that dishonor is worse than death, then you can ask yourself, what is worse than death? Breaking your vows? Betraying your people? Compromising your values? What is worse than death? I think most people have something they'd be willing to die for. I've cowered in the face of adversity on occasion. Mainly as a kid. And it haunted me. I teach my kids how to stand up for themselves because the pain of feeling ashamed that you cowered in the face of adversity and you didn't stand up for what you believed in, it's haunting, it's torturous. It lives for a long time. The pain of cuts and bruises, they go away, even broken bones, relatively quickly. But the pain of shame at having dishonored yourself, fallen from your virtue, not standing up for what you believe in, that pain is, it tortures you for a long time. So I want to spare my children that, so I teach them, I find out what they believe in, and when I know they're going to come up against it, I steel them, I ready them for it, so they can do the right thing when the time comes and they won't have to feel that pain. I would die for my faith. I would die to protect our temple. I would die to protect the deities. I also would die to protect innocent people. Some people I love enough I would trade my life for theirs. If you're an innocent, I'll put myself in harm's way because that's part of my honor code. Like one time my friends, these murderers, they were getting ready to rape a girl. Gang rape a girl. And I called the cops on them. I split, went to a payphone and called the cops. It was too much for me. Somehow I could wrap my head around them murdering other gang members, but not around raping an innocent person. That was too much for me. My two allegiances came in conflict with one another. Well, one of the things I ask myself, just because of the way I think of the world, when I really care about somebody, I would trade my life for theirs. Not like if you're an innocent walking down the street and somebody's assaulting you, I have to step up and put myself in harm's way just so I can sleep at night. I'd rather sleep with a broken bone than go home feeling like a coward. But if I really love somebody, then even if it was just one-to-one, I think in these terms: would I give my life for this person? Not everybody makes that list for me. I have to be close to somebody. I have to really love somebody. I love Mars that much. I trade my life for Mars. The world doesn't work like that. He was that important to me. I respect people who have something they value in life enough that they would give up their life for it. They have something they love enough that they would put themselves in harm's way for it. They have something that they would rather die than compromise. I respect that. I respect such people. Because of that, even when I look at gang members and I see their fearlessness in the face of death, I appreciate it. I understand it. They'd rather die for their tribe with their heart full than cower and live. They're indoctrinated like that from a young age. They're raised in that culture, that violent culture, and they're raised from a young age. There are things more important than living and breathing. Your people is one of them, and your people are on this block. I respect it. I appreciated Nipsey Hussle's statement to the paparazzi. I understood it and I appreciated it. I identified with it. Maharaj was also like that. Maharaj was fearless. Maharaj was heroic. He was the most fearless. It's interesting. He was like these gangsters I knew. He's like these military people I knew. He's like the people in my tradition I know. But he was super mild-mannered completely cultured, the most nonviolent person ever, the opposite of these ruffians and dacoits and thugs and brigands and criminals. He was saintly. But he had this same fearlessness. He had the same fearlessness. More. He was, when I look at honor, it's like, all right, it's worth something. But it really pales in comparison to the love of Krishna in terms of its depth. And when I look at Maharaj's sense of honor, which was linked to his theism, which was linked to his love for Krishna, which was linked to his trust in Krishna, it went beyond one lifetime. It went beyond a fear of shame. It went beyond a fear of losing something which was more important than life itself. And his fearlessness just came from this really rich, romantic, deep, profound, loving, intimate relationship with Krishna that was real and vital enough that everything else became secondary. My gurus are the most gangster. They're the most fearless. They're the most detached. They're the most capable of walking away. They're the most capable of letting go, even of their own body. They've got such a rich life with Krishna going on. It's not fear-based. It's not trying to avoid shame. It's based on their cups being full, their hearts being full, and the clarity that comes from that. And their ability to just surgically move through this world and let go when it's time. Let go of people, let go of places, let go of things, let go of their own body. When it's time. See, you move a little bit and she stops. My gurus are my heroes. They're the most manly. They're the most gangster. They're the greatest warriors. They're the most fearless. They're the strongest. But not like a material strength. It's their love for Krishna, which is rich enough and deep enough and real enough and vital enough that it overwhelms everything else and allows them to heroically let go. Even those gangsters, those thugs, they were addicted to so many vices. They bent the knee to so many vices. They became victimized and controlled by their senses. So they were tough and fearless with one thing, but pathetic and weak with another. Maharaj was fearless across the board. He had no vices. He had no skeletons. And so when it came time to let go, he didn't want to be put on a ventilator. And then when the devotees really want him to or are freaking out about, then he let them do that. Even though I know it wasn't what he was into. He tolerated that. So yeah, that's the Vaishnava. Maharaj was so cultured, so refined, so sweet, from such a pure background. And he was simultaneously fearless and heroic and just incredibly powerful. Okay. Those are my thoughts about Maharaj today. I guess there's more. When it's your time to go, when it's your time to move forward, Krishna makes arrangements to make that happen. And generally speaking, externally it looks a little messy. You got to have some depth to see what's really going on. To recognize when you got reversals in your own life, when things are getting taken away, when you feel like how actually Krishna's just moving you forward. And so, from an external point of view, when it's time for something to get taken away, when it's time for you to move forward, when it's time for you to let go, from an external point of view, usually it doesn't look too pretty. By the time Krishna has to do this for you, it usually doesn't look too pretty. And you require some kind of a surgical vision, some kind of a deeper vision to see what's really going on. And so when you look at Maharaj's life and how equipoised he was and how transcendental he was, you look at the quality of his life, it's really easy to die for what you're behind. It's much, much more difficult to live for what you believe in. It's easy to throw yourself on the sword one time and give up your life in a blaze of glory. It just takes 5 seconds. What's the big deal? That's not so gangster after all. You really want to see what somebody's made of? See what they're willing to live for. See if they love something enough they're willing to live for it. And when you look at Maharaj, you see 50 years of him living for Krishna without missing a beat. Death is nothing for such a devotee. It might look a little complicated externally. That's because we're complicated. For him, it would have been real straightforward. He thinks about Krishna every day for 50 years, and he thinks about Krishna while he's in a coma, while he's on a ventilator for a couple of weeks. No sweat off his back. You want to look at what somebody's made of, you look at how they live their life. Don't get faked out by the little blaze of glory. Are we done? So log off on IG. Thank you very much for joining us on IGTV. If you're on Zoom or